got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. Anxiety filling up every space.
Jungkook was in his office locking a Mafia deal and Lime bragged in. Jungkook glared at him along with RM, who is his second eldest time. 32 Vita. Lime spoke breathlessly. Jungkook's heart thrummed in his ribcage. The last time he heard the words, he killed 30 people just to calm down. 32 means danger, and Vita means life. Jungkook uses Vita for Ryan, and the last time Lime told him the word, he rescued Ryan from the maze, and this time, no way, no way. Mia Vita, please be safe. Jungkook prayed in his head. Jungkook immediately stood up. Where are you going? The man asked, sitting on the other hand with a sample of the latest advanced GPMG. I'm taking it for the ride. He spoke, picking up the gun from the table. I'll confirm tomorrow, he added and left. Jungkook gave a brief look to Lime. Aren't you her personal bodyguard? What the do I pay you for? Jungkook growled. She told me she wants some time alone and told me to leave her. I was on her tail still, but you know how good she is at escaping. She dodged me. I received a signal from her house, that only she knows or I know. That's for emergencies. I don't know what happened, but her phone is ringing and she's not picking up, and I came straight to you. CCTV footage has been taped. Lime told Jungkook. Jungkook clenched his fist and held him by his collar. Anything happened to her and I'll bury you alive, Jungkook told him. It's not the time to fight, RM told Jungkook, and he jerked Lime. He ran to his car and went to her home, continuously trying her phone. He reached her house, breaking at lost 12 signals on his way. He rushed inside with his gun. Lime and RM on his tail. He entered quietly. He searched the whole house along them. Whole house was empty now. The only room to be checked was her room. Jungkook quietly stood by the door, RM on the other side with his gun in his hand. Jungkook kicked the door open and entered inside. He scanned the room, and the room was empty. He signaled RM to check the closet, and he moved to the bathroom. He checked the bathroom and it was empty. RM called him and he rushed to the closet. He entered and stepped on something. A rose. He stopped and picked it up. The same rose he used to give her. The rose turned brown along with the thorns on the stem. Jungkook scanned the room and saw many roses scattered on the floor, all given by him. He didn't know she collected them. He inhaled sharply to his nose, biting his inner cheek. A ring brought him out of his trance, and he saw her purse on the floor. He took his steps towards it and picked her purse. Her phone was ringing in it. An unknown number was blowing her phone. It went out soon after he picked it up. Something caught his attention and he yelled, "Get out of here!" He ran outside along with RM and Liam. As they stepped out, the huge blow sent them all flying to the front, the house blazing in fire. "Wake up, bitch!" Lucas spoke, throwing a bucket of cold water at her, causing her to shiver in coldness. She opened her eyes and looked around. She was in the same dark place she was 7 years ago. A wave of panic rolled through her body. She pulled her hands, but they were restrained behind her on the pole. She pulled harder when another wave of panic coursed through her. She looked up and saw 3 pairs of evil eyes staring at her with hatred and lust. She pulled harder at her restraints. Blake crouched down, put his knee over her leg, and grabbed her chin harshly. "Look at your face. It brought you back to us here," he spoke with his eyes scanning her, then going down to the slit over her breast. "He turned you into a freaking Mafia doll, and God forbid if my doesn't strain at the view. What do you say, boys?" He uttered his venomous words and laughed along with his brothers. "Well, not gonna lie, but she looks horrible. I wonder if she feels the same as the girl she came for. She was a screamer. I wonder if she. Shut your dirty mouth, one snarled. Glaring at him, Blake slapped her with the back of his hand and again gripped her jaw. You don't get to say, you don't get to speak, and you don't get to breathe. He snarled, pinching her nose and covering her mouth. Wine writhed when she struggled to breathe. He released her when she was about to faint. He backed away and stared at her while she inhaled the much needed air in her lungs and coughed. Let's get some work done before having fun, shall we, boys? Blake asked his brothers, getting up. We all have a lot to level up. We'll be back to show you how, Vin spoke, smirking. They all went out, leaving her alone in the room. Her heart thrummed in her chest, and she looked for anything to cut her ropes. Her heart thrummed. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. She shivered in the cold room. All she could do at the moment is just stay calm and wait. After some time, she managed to get a piece of glass sitting far on the ground. She used her feet to get the glass near her and finally managed to bringing it to her hands. She started cutting the ropes. In haste, she slightly cut her wrist but finally managed to get free. She got up and examined her surroundings. The door was locked and she needed to get it open. She decided to play an act. She sat in her previous position and spoke loudly. Hey, is anyone out there? Can you help me? Can you get me some water? No one reacted. She wanted to confirm if there is someone outside on the guard. Can you hear me? Please get me some water. She yelled again. No one responded. As she moved, the door opened and she got back to her abandoned position with a piece of glass in her hand. Here, drink it. The ugly, bulky man spoke, giving her the water bottle. My hands are tied. Can you help me, please? She spoke. He groaned and crouched down. He brought the bottle to her lips and she acted on drinking. She filled some water in her mouth and, seeking the opportunity, stabbed the man on the neck, hitting his carotid arteries. He cupped his neck to stop the bleeding. She pushed him and stood up. She threw the water in her mouth on his face. Did you really think I will drink something from you rascals? She huffed. Wine moved to the door and he grabbed her ankle. She kicked his face with her other foot and spoke. Ain't no one has the audacity to capture the queen, let alone touch me, and the ones who do will die painfully. She exited the room, leaving a bloody mess before taking his gun and knife. Fat pigs left only one man outside. She quietly sneaked out. She peeked at the hallway and saw two guards patrolling the area. She took off her heels. She threw a stone at their feet, and one of them came to check who sent the stone. She hid behind a pillar, and as he turned to his right, she took hold of him, clutching his mouth and slicing its throat. She didn't let his body collapse, but held it and dragged him to a corner. She took his knife and his gun. They kept her in the lost room of this one floor, abandoned building. After a few minutes, the other guard also came, calling for him, and as he turned, he spotted him bleeding. As he turned around, she stabbed him in the gut and then sliced his throat open, a streak of blood falling on her, staining her neck. She heard a few gunshots. She took his gun and followed the gunshot sound. Going through a dark hallway, a guard patrolling suddenly came to her front right. She took out her gun and shot him in between his eyes. Another guard came. She covered herself behind the pillar and shot him in the gut. She sneaked outside, following the gunshots. She halted, hearing some murmurs. You ain't no going alive from here. She heard the deep guttural voice that disgusts her. She peeked from the slightly ajar door. She saw him pointing his gun at Jungkook and Jungkook pointing his gun at him. You dare to kidnap my fiance. Ain't no way I'm going away without your head along with her. Jungkook spoke. A different kind of pride close to her at his words, almost feral. The corner of her mouth twitched, but her blood boiled when she saw a man launching to Jungkook. She gritted her teeth. She stopped in the dark and shot him on his head. Everyone looked at her direction with a frown. She stepped outside of the dark and spoke. Hello, hello, Mr. Marathi. How have you been? I was doing great, but then I saw you pointing your gun at my man, and that makes my hand itch, and I want your head off your shoulders. That would be an exciting process. Can I do that politely, please? She spoke with a light smile on her face. For instance, she gave the vibes of a psycho, but she isn't less than a psycho after all. All the Moratis, shocked, looked at her. Win tried to make a move, but she shot him on the knee, blowing his kneecap. He grunted as blood oozed out of his knee. I don't like overreaches, she spoke and made a pout. Baby, tell them. She looked at Jungkook and spoke. He smirked. They gotta test the water, Milsol. He spoke, smirking. She hummed. They all observed her from head to toe, bare thighs covered in blood, along with legs and her decent cleavage. Jungkook looked at her head to toe and poked his inner cheek, visible at her queen vibe. Jungkook's men took over the place, and Moratis have no other choice to cower down. Blake and Luca glared at her. Blake tried to charge over her, and Jungkook punched him, grabbing his neck. Wrong move, young man, he growled, and punched him down on the floor. Blood oozed down his nose. Autumn pushed him off him. Jungkook looked at her, and she was staring at him. Wine's throat constricted, her breathings labored, panic returning, and she swayed, and her eyes blurring and then shutting. Jungkook saw her and caught her before she could fall. Wine? Wine, he called her, shaking, slapping her cheeks lightly. He cursed. Her consciousness returned, and the familiar smell she was craving for weeks hit her. She opened her eyes and found herself in her nest. His bed is her nest. Her actual home. She looked around but couldn't find him. A tear made its way at how much she missed this room. How much she missed him. She sat up straight. She looked at her side table and found 2 roses sitting there. She frowned, as he always gave her one every day, and why 2 today? Her thought felt right. She reached out for the glass and took a sip of her favorite orange juice, but as she took the sip, she felt like throwing up. She ran to the bathroom and went to the toilet. She heaved, and tears made their way to her eyes. She felt her hair gathering up and the familiar smell hitting her nostrils. She threw up and went to the sink to clean herself. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw his shirt only covering her. She looked at him. His worried eyes looked at her in the mirror. She stared at him and realized he was only in the towel. The droplets were still sitting on his bare chest and abs. That means he was in the shower. The undeniable desire to lick every droplet with her tongue. She was overcome by a desire to please. Are you all right, baby? He asked. Her eyes watered as she realized how much she missed his voice. She heard him in the house, but he didn't talk to her and gave her space. But maybe she wants him to core her. She hugged him, making her shirt wet with his wet body. She sniffed as he wrapped his hands around her. I missed you, she told him in her broken voice. I missed you more. Every day, every hour, every minute and every second. When I wake up, when I get out of the bathroom in a towel, when I get ready, on the dining table, your calls, when I come back, when I lay in this bed alone. It all made me feel so lonely. You're my soul, and you took it away from me, he told her, his voice filled with pain. She hugged him tighter. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, she told him and sobbed again. She cried, and when she looked at him, he was also crying. She cupped his face, still in his arms. She wiped his tears and spoke. I will never do that again. I promise. She kissed him. Promise, kiss, promise, kiss, promise. He held it even tighter. I gave you space this time, but it was the first and the last time. I will not give you space, at least for yourself. Your space is mine, even if you poop is stuck and you can't get it out. I will not give you space. I'll watch you taking that shit out. Do you understand me? He spoke, and she looked at him with her eyes and mouth wide open. He bit her bottom lip and spoke. Do you? She cleared her throat and nodded, aroused by his possessiveness. Why did you give me two flowers today? She asked him. He smiled and spoke. One for you and one for... To be continued. Eid Mubarak, everyone.